thunder in the head, unlike anything Evelyn had experienced before. She drowned in it, keeled over her bedside, vomiting onto the carpet. She could not see out of her right eye. Pins and needles danced across her arms and legs. Her husband, hands shaking, sweat soaking his underarms, used his phone flashlight to look at her eye. Dilated, the light sending a deep groan from Evelyn's throat. It was 2:23 in the morning. The EMTs took one look at her and had her in the back of the ambulance in seconds. Lights and sirens strangled Evelyn's words in her mouth, and she muttered numbly about health insurance and Social Security. Her husband followed in their cream-colored Toyota Echo. She could feel her heartbeat in her toes. And then, peace. Sudden and immaculate, just as the ambulance back doors had opened and the EMTs prepared to pull the stretcher from the truck. The thunder had left her, her heart calmed, and the blank space had left her vision. The doctor, of course, would hear none of it. Stroke symptoms that intense do not simply cease. In fact, judging by what she had told the nurses, the doctor was shocked that she had even made it to the hospital. "So unfortunately we can't administer the clotbuster," he said, in a calm but hasty voice. "The stroke woke you up, so for all we know, you could have been showing symptoms in your sleep for hours. There's a chance it would kill you, so instead we're going to have to cut you open. First things first, they're prepping the MRI so we can get a look at your brain." "Can I see George?" Evelyn asked. "We'll make sure you see your husband before surgery. Don't sweat it," he said. The MRI was more akin to a coffin than a medical instrument. A small, claustrophobic thing, with an examination table designed to slide her inside. The nurse held her hand as they examined her for piercings or fillings in her teeth. "It's going to be a little scary," the nurse said. "I won't lie to you. This thing is loud as hell, and it's more than a tight squeeze." She pointed to a monitor on the wall. Indecipherable numbers and data coated its screen. "Lucky for you, this bad boy's a newer model. When you're all done, and it won't be but a minute that you're inside, the image of your brain will display right up there, all digital, just like that." When it was done, and they had pulled her from the stomach of the machine, the nurse patted her on the back. "There you go. Don't try to sit up too quickly," she said. "Hey, want to see what your brain looks like? It's super cool." She grinned as she spoke, genuinely fascinated by her work. Evelyn said nothing. Once again, the nurse pointed at the monitor, now a crisp white, the word "processing" in bold yellow font flashing on the screen. And then, the image appeared. At first, Evelyn did not understand what she was seeing. It appeared more like a sponge than a brain, black and white, transparent, a tangled mess of neurons and cerebellum. And within it, a great black blotch, the unmistakable shape of a human fetus. The nurse leapt back in her chair, nearly toppling over. "Oh shit! Oh shit! Oh fuck!" she shouted. The nurse sprinted for the door and called down the hallway. "Code black," Evelyn heard her say. "It's a code black." And then, static. A hiss behind the eyes. Evelyn fell backwards into her own mind. It was not a feeling like panic or dread that overtook her, but was instead something that she could feel in her arms and legs. A coldness that swept through her veins, dark as oil and red as rust. She felt it in her teeth, like angels in her gums. She tasted it in the air, like stale piss and electricity. This is not real. Not me. This isn't what happens to me. But why not? It has happened to thousands before her. She saw it on the news almost every night. Men in yellow hazmat suits erecting barricades, encasing horrified people by the hundreds into great plastic prison camps. Quarantine zones, they called them. Some were the size of cities. She remembered the grainy footage of men with the heads of dogs pulling their own entrails from their stomachs, of children with mouths growing upon their throats and backs. But that was up north, 1,000 miles from Evelyn's home. The governor had assured her that the plague would never touch the eastern seaboard, and she had believed him. She was safe. She was secure. And then the fetus began to laugh. George, having spent the better half of an hour staring blankly at the wall of the waiting room, met the sudden activity among hospital staff with a dull groan. Something horrible had happened, he could sense that much. Something to clog the already slow-moving gears of the hospital, but at least Evelyn was okay. According to the nurses that he'd spoken to upon signing in, she had begun feeling much better just as she had arrived. All that was left was to wait for her discharge. Resigning himself, he slouched in his chair, prepared for the hours to come, and felt himself beginning to doze off. It wasn't until the CDC arrived, in their thick hazmat suits, guns in hand, stirring him from his sleep with the announcement that the entire hospital was now subject to quarantine, that George began to feel a tightness in his chest. He stood, palms glistening with sweat, the way they often did when he no longer had control over his situation, and followed the men outside. "Do not approach the barricade." The voice from the loudspeaker burned in George's ears. "Please keep your gaze focused on the ground. Do not speak. Please keep your arms at your sides." "What the fuck is this?" a voice from ahead, a short man in his late 40s, shouted, and spat at those beyond the fences, who simply raised their rifles in turn. "Sir, please step away from the fence and refrain from speaking." "I'm not fucking sick!" The short man had grabbed handfuls of chain link and began shaking the fence. "None of us are sick. God fucking damn it. Let us..." Gunfire. Screams from every angle. The short man had taken the bullets in his stomach, his body lurching over and collapsing limply. A violent shove from George's left, and he was on the ground. Commands flooded from the loudspeaker, indecipherable in the chaos, coalescing in the airwaves. An arm scooped up from behind and pulled George to his feet. A man in a hazmat suit, weapon in his free hand, aimed at the fleeing crowd, was dragging him forward. At least 5 more armed personnel behind him. And then there was music. Gentle, low, and rhythmic, and it filled George's ears with rot. He turned, struggling against the man dragging him, to find the short man standing behind him. George could see that his mouth was moving, though his words had no sound to them, no dimension or form. Instead, he could feel them. His voice shaped George's thoughts, polluting them, smothering his soul with the very shapes that held it together. From the short man's stomach wound, there George could see a face, wide-eyed and grinning, black tongue lapping at its own teeth. He felt himself slipping from himself, felt the song bury him under mouthfuls of static, and finally, when there was only the taste of copper and the sharp bite of angels in his lungs, he allowed himself to slip into unconsciousness. The next time Evelyn would see George, she would be seeing him through many eyes. Within her, angles unknowable folded upon themselves, twisting and snapping themselves into place until they filled her entirely. A taste like bile and rose water rose up from her stomach, and dreams did flow forth from her lips, infecting the air as she walked the hospital corridors. A panicked nurse, clad in light pink scrubs and stained sneakers, crossed her path, and with a thought, Evelyn had dragged her innards from her throat. Above, somewhere between the golden blessings that danced among the walls and the harsh energy-efficient hospital lights, Evelyn laughed. My God, It's so beautiful. When George awoke, it was with deep gasps and muffled screams. The tinnitus screech of total silence hissed in his ears. Soft yet firm restraints held his arms and his legs, a thick blindfold obscuring his vision. His mouth had been tightly bound, unable even to unclench his jaw or part his lips. His cries were barely audible, even to himself, and every breath was through some kind of mechanism that traveled up his nose, down his throat, and into his trachea. "Hello, Mr. Wheatley? Can you hear me?" The voice crunched against George's eardrums, static as if played over a radio. George tensed his entire body at the new sound, his chest rising and falling as quickly as the intubation would allow. All right, try to remain calm. Now, we can't hear you from over here, and besides, you shouldn't be able to open your mouth at the moment. But we can see you. Can you understand me? Flex your right hand if you can understand me." George found that his right hand was strapped at a slightly steeper incline than his left, and each movement of his pointer finger clicked into an indentation. Good. You can use that button to communicate with us. Now, I need you to listen very carefully. Can you do that for me, Mr. Wheatley? Click the button if you understand. Once for yes, twice for no. Excellent. Good job. My name is Dr. Pargin. I'm with the CDC. Do you know what the CDC is, Mr. Wheatley? Alright, now, this is really important, and I need you to focus on what I'm about to tell you. You have been directly exposed to the songbird plague. As per quarantine procedures, you have been completely and entirely restrained. These restraints are both external to your body and internal, by which I mean they have been surgically implemented. You will not be able to move, speak, see, or even breathe without our assistance. I understand your frustration in this moment, and I can assure you that you will be released as soon as it is determined that you are not showing symptoms. Do you understand? Okay, I'm going to ask you a few more questions now. Just answer yes or no, like how we showed you. Ready? Do you remember the color of your childhood home? Mr. Wheatley? Well done. Do you remember the taste of honey? A shift, somewhere deep in George's stomach. Alright, now I'm going to read you something. You don't need to respond, we'll just be monitoring your reactions from our side. Ready? I have no name. I am but 2 days old. What shall I call thee? Happy I am. Joy is my name. Sweet joy befall thee. Pretty joy, sweet joy. But 2 days, a feeling George didn't know possible. A tearing in his abdomen, wet and burning, his screams choked by the tube in his throat. He was vaguely aware of panicked chatter screaming through his headphones. A sound of nurses scrambling, static, and behind it all, there was that music again. Softer than before, kinder. Another feeling, a burning. George felt his vomit trail forwards, seeping into his breathing tube, flooding his lungs, a sensation like broken glass in his arms and legs, and then there was light, the feeling of Evelyn's soft arms around him, the warmth of her lips, the smell of her cooking, and the taste of honey on his tongue. All around him, there was music.